If you're a Christian like me and you find yourself reciting the Lord's Prayer and you get to that line, may your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And you ask yourself, how in the world are we going to do that? Because you look at all the systems that are out there and the way that we've structured ourselves for so long, and you just don't see a way that all those principles can really be lived out fully and thoroughly within any of them. So today we're going to be talking about a possible contender on that list of ways that we could build a more equitable, just, compassionate world, and that is holarchy. On yesterday's episode, we discussed what a holon is and how it relates to various parts. If you missed that, you might want to go and watch that episode before this one. Today, we're going to be talking about how those parts, those holons, those circles of power interrelate with each other to build something new and powerful and sustainable for the future. So let's talk about holarchy today as we walk together down CreationsPaths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christopagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan druid and sous chef to the Dagda. And today we are honoring the third quarter moon, the path of the Via Positiva. We enjoy wonder, splendor, and today we're going to behold the wonder and splendor of holarchy.
And as always, you can go over to CreationsPaths.com where you'll find a full moon devotional to help you meditate on the various meanings of this moon. Holarchy is a way for various parts to relate to each other. This is going to sound familiar to some and very challenging to others. Please try to go along on the ride with us and see where you end up at the end, because this is a fascinating idea that has really enraptured my mind. We're going to be doing a lot of writing about holarchy over at fractalkinship.com. A lot of our thoughts about this are going to be sprouting up through regular updates. So head on over there, bookmark it, and go back often and see what all's going on, because we will do updates here on the podcast. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss a thing because we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. All right, let's just get into it now, shall we? So what is holarchy? Well, if a holon is an entity in and of itself that can participate in larger and smaller holon, a holarchy is how we actually put them together. In fact, the very word holarchy originally came about as an alternative term to the term hierarchy. Whereas in a hierarchy, we are structuring things in a ladder, building up and up, where something is above something else. We're building more laterally, moving across, where people are basically linking arms, joining together, and building something where there aren't those above others. If you, like me, come from an anarchistic background, the aims are the same. The terminology and some of the ideas are a little different, and it's a different way of approaching the idea than any that I've seen before. So how would this work? We're going to have to start talking about how we are going to start functioning as societies and groups, and how we lend something very important to us as druids to all of these other circles, and that is our sovereignty. We talk a lot about sovereignty. In fact, it's one of the core principles that we laid out when we were discussing druidry, because it is such a core concept to druidry and to Irish thought in general. It is how we behave, how we live in right relationship with the land and with all of those that inhabit it.
The talk yesterday about holons, a good chunk of that was about the sovereignty and having right sovereignty, in fact, that right relationship between one holon and the next.
And so the idea here in a holarchy is not to give up that sovereignty, but how to build something through mutual aid and consensus and collective resonance that allows us to do things together that move us forward as a society. So what might that look like? This is something that you actually see very natively in a lot of people, where positions arise and fall as necessary. So you've decided that you're going to throw a party. One of your friends is really good at music and putting the DJ together, so they are the music master for the evening. One of your friends is really good at cooking and happens to own up a nice barbecue grill that they can bring along to the cookout. So they're the food master. Others of your friends are good at organizing games. Others are good at inviting people and making sure that the right people are invited to make sure that the event's going to be the most fun that it can possibly be. So they get their own roles assigned as well. Are these roles permanent? Are they enduring? Are they the roles that you have to kneel down and bow down to as we're creating the new kings and queens of the universe? Nope. They're temporary roles that get assigned as tasks arise. And once the party is over, everything dissolves and we go back into the relationships that we had before. Some of these relationships might be more enduring than others. For example, Brian and I are married and have been for decades now. Time is a persistent illusion that haunts me. So the relationship that we have set up with each other and the partnership that we have built has created a new holon. There's not just the one that is me or the sovereignty that is him. There is a sovereignty that has emerged. It is something that came about because we decided that we wanted to spend our lives together. We made agreements with each other in a fairly informal way because legal marriage was not open to us when we first got together, and a relationship and how things work between us that has been negotiated and renegotiated over the years. There is no hierarchy between the two of us. Sometimes Brian takes the lead. Sometimes I take the lead. Often the one who takes the lead is the one who has the most experience in the thing that's being done at the time.
And that's the thing too, is there's that balance as well, because as we were talking about yesterday, tyranny can arise if one sovereign part of this group exerted itself in a way that expected compliance, like in a hierarchy where you have the head of the household. The head of the household creates a tyranny where everyone then has to be subservient, whether they're right or wrong. Even if everyone watches them leading the whole household into doom and destruction, they just have to go along for the ride, or they have to bail out and withdraw from that collective. The same problem happens where the individual just complies and gives up any individuality in that hierarchical structure. They then just are a cog in the machine, subservient part. Once again, collectivism run into the same problem in a household, because then everyone gets a vote. If you have 2 adults and 5 children, and the children are too young and dumb, it just means they lack the knowledge. They're ignorant. The 5 want to eat candy for dinner, and their 5 votes outweigh the 2 adults that know better, that know they need to have proper nutritional health, be healthy. The collectivism allows for that tyranny again, and this required compliance. Same thing with individualism. You get a household where everybody's just individuals. It's not a household. No. It's a collective of individuals. It's just a bunch of little individual parts.
This is the problem that our previous models have fallen into, where you are either subsumed into the whole through some collectivist way of thinking, or you are left out in the cold, alone and isolated in a libertarian way of thinking, or you are subject to an authoritarian power, as in most other forms of thinking. Most other forms of government are some modulated tyranny. Even a democracy is a modulated tyranny where the majority are allowed to run tyrannically over the minority at all times. Safeguards are often tried to be put in, but they're not always permanent. They don't always work.
They work until they fail.
Yeah.
One of the ones I think several listeners hearing my voice can understand this. They're part of a system, but they're left with this feeling because of the system structure that they question whether their contribution even matters. They feel like if they were taken out of the system, it wouldn't even matter, because the way the system is structured, it makes them appear to not matter, even if they actually are integral. And the other members of the system might be like, no, it matters, but there's no structures there to allow that communication to occur, to happen.
One of the most interesting and powerful things you find in holocratic models when you're trying to see what or any group structure would look like is very strong aversion to the idea of permanence. And that's actually something that attracted me to it, because a lot of times a group is put together for a specific purpose. And then once it outlives its purpose, it goes into mission creep and starts trying to find other things to justify its existence. Every system, every circle we draw has a self-preservation instinct. Once you create a group, the group itself will want to survive, whether it should or not. And the way that we are in this holocratic model is that they arise and fall. They have to justify their existence at any point. And if they can no longer justify their existence, they just dissolve back into the separate parts that they had in them in the first place. There are a lot of things like this. When we start thinking about how should we be structured, the country that I live in is structured into very arbitrary blocks of states, counties, municipalities. And I say it that way because we have cities and towns and villages and unincorporated areas, and it gets all kinds of messy in detail in this country. And that varies again from state to state. And then you get down into the street level and the neighborhood and everything else. And these are arbitrary distinctions that were formed ages ago that have no bearing on who lives there now. In fact, when the borders to the state that we live in were originally made, nobody lived here. A lot more people live here now, but we have not redrawn any of those maps to deal with those changes. You see, we think of those lines that we've drawn on the map as permanent structure. They're not something that can or should change. And we see wars being fought over this. Countries fight because parts of them want to go away. We see arguments over certain parts of states that want to become other parts of states, certain parts of cities that want to become their own cities. And these great titanic fights break out because everyone is arguing over power. In a Holocratic model, power is something that is always reserved to the people, to the smallest unit within the system, and not the system itself. That power hungry nature that hierarchies get themselves into has a harder chance of being allowed to maintain itself. It's really a way to try to start thinking outside of the norms that we have. Like, should there be a neighborhood holon for the street that we live on? Is there a time when that would be a good thing? There was, when our street had fallen apart and the city fathers were not willing to send the trucks out here to repave the street. We all organized up and down the street, and what we needed to do, and protested, and we signed petitions, and we made a stink, and lo and behold, they redid the street so that we didn't have potholes everywhere that were doing damage to our vehicles. Did we continue having this neighborhood organization? No, we live in a fairly rural suburban area that doesn't need an association, so it dissolved. There have been attempts to revive it for various dubious causes. Because the causes were dubious, people did not sign on and they didn't get the same reaction. And so it was not able to reform and do some of the harms those trying to reform it wanted. That's a decent example of how a holocratic society would function. These institutions would arise and fall as necessary. Some would be semi-permanent, the bar or the American Medical Association.
Yeah. This is where guilds come back into the picture, because these various guilds would be putting forward or helping to set the standards. They themselves would be self-governing to help ensure the safety of the community. When looking at the Holarchy, you're looking at not only the agency, but also the responsibility that comes along with that within the nested circle of existence. Because once we look at the responsibilities, when we start to look at the question of why you exist, we can get to the heart of what are the incentives and disincentives there to help reinforce what it's supposed to actually be doing, its actual responsibility. This is how we can find out if this nested circle has run amok. Because if its responsibility is like a guild or a nested circle that's supposed to help ensure that the tradespeople under that or within that nested circle are operating within certain ethics and living in right relationship with the communities they are serving. Once we know that's their responsibility, then we can look at how they are structuring themselves. Are they structuring themselves in a way that furthers that, or have they allowed, say, interest in money and the accumulation of wealth to become their responsibility and are no longer living up to the responsibility of practicing their trade in a way that is in right relationship with the community?
And the way that this actually would function in the real world, I don't think requires a revolution. I think that one of the things that makes this idea powerful is it is something that can and should be built from the ground up as various communities start organizing themselves in various forms. As we were talking about on yesterday's episode, an individual or even a group of individuals can exist in multiple, as we are organizing our churches, our communities, our community centers, whatever we feel that we need on the ground, we can then take those movements and start moving them up the chain of command and bring reform literally from the bottom up and change the system all the way up. Because this I think is what all of the political ideologies that are out there are missing, is they all seem to have this built-in instinct for top-down leadership, that we have to either topple the current structure entirely before we get started, or we have to seize it or take it over. That it's highly likely that what would actually work better, because as we know, revolutions are not good for the people in a country with a revolution. All revolutions fail. And before anybody points to the United States as an example of one that didn't, look at how many governments we had before the one that we currently have.
Yeah, look back in history. There was many, many failings before we finally got what we got now. And even then, we had to do 14 amendments initially, and then many amendments afterwards over the last couple hundred years.
Yeah, the main thing is like the country that was founded failed. Country that came to revolution actually failed. There were actually wars between the states after the revolution, between the revolution and the founding of the country. We politely skip over in history because it doesn't fit the narrative of nation states that we're currently living under. I don't think what we actually want is a revolution, because the outcome of most revolutions is negative. But that doesn't mean we don't work for change. By working from the ground up, we're actually activating people and getting people involved in ways that can, through the existing voting process, start to make the change we need and want to see, and do what needs to be done, an actual grassroots movement from the bottom up. That's the problem with top-down models. If the leader dies, the movement dies. This happened in the 60s. There were a lot of prominent leaders, and when they were taken out, the movements sputtered out underneath them or spiraled out under. When everything and functionally leaderless, that type of aggressive counter cannot.
And that's the thing, is when somebody gets discouraged and goes, "Oh, this is too big of a thing," we got to look back at one of our first narratives. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You start with one bite at a time, and you don't eat the elephant by yelling at a lion or tiger or a hyena. You sit down and you start eating. And that's the other thing, is when you start looking at this from this Holarchy perspective, you start to look at it, instead of making enemies, you can start to see the responsibilities. Every time I think of this, I think of the healthcare issue in the States, and in a lot of countries are suffering from healthcare challenges. The systems that were created are big and messy. If you just attack healthcare, you have a lot of well-meaning doctors trying to help. They're good people that get villainized because they are part of a system. And if you're just attacking the system, that's it. But when you start looking at what is the responsibility, healthcare's responsibility is supposed to be the health and well-being of the community that they're serving, not for profit. If their responsibility is for profit, then that's not healthcare. That's something else. Being able to look at those responsibilities, the different nested circles, you don't just attack the administrative part of the medical system, because some of that administrative element is probably well justified and needed. We need to make sure that your health records are kept and organized properly, secure, and all that. So there is value there. There is importance there, and can then start to look at this in its elements and go, okay, these reforms can go bottom up then. And you can start re-envisioning how all this can actually work together, and this in right relationship and with sovereignty.
And this is why the biological model that we've been talking about with Holons is very important, because how does this spread? Through mitosis, through cellular division. Like, this is how you grow and grow. And then at a certain point, you find a subdivision that needs to happen that breaks off in two groups, and those two groups then do their thing, and then they divide into four, and so on. You see this propagating and eventually displacing the system that's currently there. It will small, but we have a model to continue growing. We are just starting to scratch the surface with this. There's so much more that we could do here. If you're interested in this and want to start thinking about how we can do this, start looking at places where you are rubbing up against these systems, where you are encountering different groups and how they interact and function with each other. Start cataloging them, whether in your head or, as Brian likes to say, your journal.
Write it in your journal.
Start seeing how you are interacting with all of these disparate and different systems, and then start thinking about how you can participate and in what ways you can participate. If you're unhappy with the political parties that exist in the country, state, or region that you're in, how do you become a part of that political party? What does it take to get yourself on the inside and start working on that reform from the ground up.
'Cause that's-
How do you become the infectious contagion that gets on the inside that starts bringing change?
And that's the thing to watch out for too. Once you know this, you can see what is going to be that right resonance. You can't allow yourself to get so mad that you're driven into isolation, because that's the old system winning. And you can't allow yourself to just give up or be absorbed by the system, because once again, they win too. So you want to strike that right resonance.
Anyone who tells you to either obey or disengage are just trying to have power over.
Yep.
It's very simple. And so when people are trying to say you have to be all in completely 100%, look for receipts. What are they trying to get out of you? If they're telling you to just disengage with the system, that's often associated with keep listening to me because I alone can heal you. Neither one of those is a healthy instinct within the system. They need to be brought into a certain amount of balance. And that's what you're looking for, how to bring about that balance and to start seeing it in your own life. When Stonewall happened, it was a few people in the bar that were fed up, that picked up a brick and started standing up for themselves. And then more people showed up and more people showed up. Stonewall was a riot that lasted for days. Don't let anybody let you think that it was just like a little angry one night. They pushed the police back. The police pushed them back. It lasted for days. And it had such a lasting impact on the people that were there. They decided to commemorate it the next year. And then we got the pride parades. And in that organization for the pride parades, we started getting the various rights groups and mutual aid groups start coming out. It was this little bitty seed that created a new group. And then that group divided and subdivided and became a movement in and of itself. That's what we're talking about here. You don't know what the catalyst is going to be. You don't know what is going to actually cause that division to start happening, that cell division, not like divisiveness, but cell division to start happening, to start that growth and to start bringing this new thing alive. But if you're not trying, it's not going to happen. We have only just scratched the surface of this idea. There's so much more we can go into. In the future, we'll probably do more episodes about that. Until then, you can always go over to fractalkinship.com, which is where we're going to be cataloging all of our thoughts on these things as we are developing and further developing and clarifying and really working through all of this to try to find a way forward to help us all get to the places that we're trying to be. We didn't even get into some of the deeper aspects and how it interrelates with all of that. There's so much here that we could go into, but you can find that. It'll start appearing over at Fractal Kinship. We're going to be doing regular content pushes over there. So just bookmark the site and go back regularly to see what all has been added, because we're just going to be working on this a lot. The work that we feel drawn to right now. It's what resonates with us strong. And yeah, that's a word you're going to be hearing a lot more, especially as we refine our thoughts and feelings about it. So let me know.
Hopefully a word that'll resonate with you.
This is the first time you've heard about any of this. This isn't an idea that's strictly unique to us. This is an idea that has been floated before in various other ways and various other names. And also sometimes in the form of Holacracy, which is a wonderful book that came out, 10, 15 years ago?
I think it's about that long ago.
These are ideas that have been floating around for a while and that we've been engaging with for a while. And we finally have gotten to a place where everything's clicking. We're seeing the vision and how to share it better. So let us know what you think in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. But you can leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a message there, and we will see it, and we will be able to get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars, you can pass our way. We offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both, and you can support us using the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. We are ever so grateful. Thank you so much. You all really do help us keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If we've ever said anything that's helped you out, please share it with others. That helps us out more than you know. I think it's only right to say a prayer to the person I think of as the great organizer, oh, Blessed Saint Martha, who made sure that everyone was taken care of, that all the meetings that took place between the apostles, the disciples, and all who came to hear the teachings of our Lord Jesus Christ. Be with us as we start looking at organizing and doing the hard work in the background that few see and few will ever be recognized for, to build a better life and a better world for everyone. Amen.
Amen.